Number 10. Deadpool. Deadpool has gone through phases where he was fully cured of his power set and even pretty once more in the comics, like back during Daniel Way's Deadpool run, looking completely normal but without his healing factor. But the most startling shift when it comes to Deadpool's appearance has to be between his on-screen adaptations. That's right, we're talking about the comparison between Deadpool's cinematic debut in the X-Men Origins Wolverine film and his own self-titled film franchise. Although oddly enough, both roles feature him played by Ryan Reynolds. The two adaptations could not be more different. Thankfully in Deadpool 2, Wade manages to fix Cable's temporal dial. Using this device to time travel, Wade is not only able to save Vanessa, who initially died at the beginning of that film, but is also able to clean up the timelines by killing the previous version of himself, who is also known as Weapon 11. It should also be noted that in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool appeared fully as a villain, as opposed to the lovable mess of an anti-hero we've come to know him as within his own film franchise. Number 9. Raquel. I never know how to say this name, but I'm pretty sure it's like Raquel. How do you say Skrull names? That's the question. For some reason, probably because she had been gone so long, Raquel, aka the Skrull Empress, aka Emperor Doric VIII / Hulkling / Teddy Altman's grandmother, was completely unrecognized when she returned. Raquel was revealed to be alive and well, and also sleuthing it up as she impersonated T'Nolth the Pursuer, an elite member of the Kree forces. And apparently Raquel had been impersonating T'Nolth so long she had in essence created her persona and basically was her. Raquel had actually been plotting and planning in secret, putting in place all the pieces to bring together the Kree and Skrull Empire, uniting them in an alliance in order to ensure her grandson was the one to rule over the now allied empire, as we saw in Empire. That's the name of the event, so not to be redundant. It was an empire, but it's spelled empire with a Y because it's a whole other thing. And yet when she was revealed in that event to be the one revealed as the Skrull pretending to be T'Nolth, many Marvel fans actually needed to crack open their comic history books and review just who exactly she was, with many people mistaking her for Veronki, the Skrull Queen. But yes, this is Raquel. She was believed to have died when the Skrull homeworld perished along with her daughter Princess Nell, as their world was devoured by Galactus. She made her first appearance in the Fantastic Four original series in issue 206 and was believed to have perished in issue 257. But she didn't, she was still alive, and then she came back years later and everyone went, who is that? What? Veronki? What? Not Veronki, two different people. Number 8. KRAVEN the Hunter. You might think you recognize KRAVEN, but do you really? After all, the current KRAVEN that you've seen turning up in the current Beyond storyline of the Amazing Spider-Man series is actually none other than KRAVEN's last son. Well, his last clone son, anyway. This clone of KRAVEN was given the name of Last Son after he hunted down all his other brothers, his other clone brothers, who had also been trained by Sergei Kravinoff, the KRAVEN himself. As such, this clone of KRAVEN was named his true heir, and since then has also taken up the mantle of KRAVEN the Hunter. So while he may look like KRAVEN, albeit a younger version of him, this KRAVEN the Hunter is not actually the original. So I guess this is a character that you would recognize, but in so doing you'd be wrong, which means I guess you didn't really recognize him then, did you? This version of KRAVEN made his first appearance in the current run of The Amazing Spider-Man, which started in 2018, first appearing back in issue 16 as the Last Son. Number 7. Xemnu. Xemnu made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery in issue number 62. We learned that Xemnu was actually a prisoner and a criminal who was retrieved and accidentally revived by a human and electrician named Joe Harper. Xemnu would go on to become known as Xemnu the Living Hulk, and would also prove to be a powerful cosmic, psionic, and all-around bizarre enemy to the Hulk and the Hulk family in time. Initially, he clashed with the original superhero powerhouse team known as the Defenders. Xemnu in his first appearance has brownish or reddish fur, but currently has reappeared in the comics with white fur, making him look kind of like a space yeti. You may not recognize him because you forgot him, or because he's just so weird, or it could be just because of this change when it comes to, you know, his overall fur color. But yeah, he's got different, I guess he dyed his fur? I don't know. What happened there? Number 6. Norman Osborn. Well, you might currently recognize Norman Osborn in terms of his appearance. When it comes to his actions and his alignment, You might not. And in modern comics, Norman has also gone through a couple dramatic redesigns and makeovers in recent history. At one point, Norman gets plastic surgery to completely change his facial appearance, reinventing himself as Mason Banks and becoming the head of Alchemex. There's even an unmasked point where we were all kind of like, wait, who's that? And then he's like, I changed my face, but it's me, Norman Osborn, aka also Mason Banks. He also has been the head of Hammer and his own Dark Avengers, and for a time posed as their version of Iron Man, tarnishing the mantle of Iron Patriot, and more recently, a depowered Norman bonded with the Carnage symbiote, allowing himself to use the Goblin Serum once more, but ultimately being driven insane by that whole experience and believing himself to actually be prime Carnage host and serial killer Cletus Cassidy. Now sane again, however, and seemingly purified by the Sin Eater, currently in the comics, Norman is on a path of redemption, having gained a new lease on life and being cured of his usual villainous intentions. Or so it would seem. I never trust Norman, but that's what's up currently. Number 5. Galactus. One villain who recently got a very mummy-inspired looking makeover was Galactus during his time in Thor's latest series as written by Donny Cates. Here in the first arc of the 2020 Thor series, referred to as Volume 6 overall of Thor, Thor takes on the immensely powerful cosmic entity known as the Black Winter. Because the Black Winter is so powerful, Thor is forced to team up with Galactus to defeat it. Unfortunately, he also learns that Galactus is actually kind of a herald for the Black Winter. FYI, that is just how powerful of a force the Black Winter is. He has Galactus as a herald. After devouring 5 planets to bolster his own power, Galactus has this power stripped from him by Thor upon this revelation. Thor leaves Galactus drained of the power cosmic, wrinkled, and de-armored, even taking Galactus's helmet as a trophy, using it as the entrance to his throne room. So while you might have recognized him previously, Galactus then got super upgraded and now is very mummified and also very dead. Oof. Number 4. Onslaught. Onslaught initially was a villain with a mysterious background. Despite the fact the powerful villain looked a ton like Magneto and seemed to pack a psionic powerhouse of abilities that echoed an evil Professor X, the character's true identity as really both of those mutants wouldn't be confirmed till after his initial appearance. When Onslaught appeared again, it was in a similar vein, and while the symbol of Onslaught might be similar, this time around when it came to the character's identity, they were even less recognizable, as it was explained that basically all the mutants of Krakoa were, in a way, Onslaught, and that Onslaught was able to exist through their constant resurrections. So while you might recognize the look of Onslaught when they returned, their true identity was even more of a mystery than the first time around. And their final form that we saw during X-Men The Onslaught Revelation was pretty wild as well, getting a bit of an update to match even the current character designs of what an amalgamated Charles and Eric would look like currently. I like that that version of Onslaught has like the black suit now, the tight black suit that Charles wears. It's a look. Number 3. One Below All. I think one of the biggest revelations of modern comics was learning that even a being as good as the One Above All, who is basically considered to be like Marvel God, has a dark side. The One Below All ended up being a major villain in the Immortal Hulk series, and we later learned that their power actually came from one of the most divine and good beings in the Marvel universe, the One Above All. The One Below All is like the Hulk for the One Above All. In other words, their darker and much more destructive other half. So while you might know the One Above All and you might know the One Below All, I bet you'd be surprised to learn that they were actually directly connected to one another. They can't exist without the other, especially given how different in appearance and alignment they both are. But this revelation was also super powerful and fitting for a series that was really all about forgiving and reconciling the darker side of the Hulk, the Hulks, and ultimately of humanity and our own individual selves. After all, we all have like a little bit of a Hulk side to us. Number 2. Killmonger. If you go on far enough back, Eric Killmonger easily becomes one of Marvel's villains you would not soon recognize. And that goes both ways. Whether we're talking about more recent fans looking back in comic history to his first appearance in Jungle Action, volume number 2, or whether we're talking about his initial fans looking at his modern MCU adaptation and comic redesign, which obviously takes inspiration from the MCU version of Eric. Killmonger made his first appearance in the second volume of Jungle Action from the 1970s in issue number 6, and even from that front cover, he just looks like really different. Here, Eric does not sport any self-created bodily scars marking his kills, but instead comes with a lot of spiky accessories, including what appears to be a spike belt, which he uses as a weapon to fight against his foe and his rival, Black Panther. All the spikes. Now he's got scars, but back then he had spikes. Number 1. The Leader. I doubt after all this time if the Leader even really recognizes himself, considering what he looks like now. Following the events of Immortal Hulk, the Leader is left no longer a supervillain, but just a guy. Throughout the course of the series, we saw the Leader only grow more evil and more powerful, it seemed. He was eventually basically influenced or possessed by the one below all, the most powerful of all Hulk-related baddies, and possibly the baddest of the bad just in general. However, after the two beings were separated from one another, Stearns was left as just a man, returned to normal. The Hulk decided to forgive the Leader, and he returned back to the Earth with all the other Hulks and Bruce Banner. It's been a long time, but Sam Stearns is no longer the Leader, at least not currently in the comics. I mean, he could return to being the Leader at some point. Instead, Samuel Stearns is just Samuel Stearns. Number 10. Super Skrull. Kl'rt might be recognizable when it comes to his character design, which admittedly has not changed that much over the years, but when it comes to his alignment, you might be somewhat surprised to learn where he is now, from where he started. Super Skrull Kl'rt made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 18. Once again, the Skrulls attempted to invade Earth and planned on defeating the FF, this time with their secret weapon, the Super Skrull, who seemed to possess all of the Fantastic Four's powers. Unfortunately, Mr. Fantastic and the team realized that these powers were likely not Super Skrull's own, and suspected in fact that they were delivered to him from the Skrull homeworld. They used a device to jam the signal that was giving Kl'rt his powers, defeating him. Currently in the comics, Kl'rt serves Emperor Hulkling, and was for a time one of his trusted advisors. Kl'rt, however, was also the one who killed Hulkling's foster mother. Recently in Empire Aftermath, Kl'rt felt so awful about his past that he actually offered his life to the Emperor. Hulkling refused to accept it though, instead preferring to make Kl'rt work in the area of diplomacy so that he might make amends for all the lives that he had taken in times of war. He was like, no. Instead, you gotta save lives, and hopefully that'll make up for it. You can't just die on me, Kl'rt. Number 9. Hell's Bells. Hell's Bells was a group of villains who were all female mutants. The team was originally assembled by Cyber, who trained all of its members and consisted of Shrew, Briquette, Flame, Tremolo, and Vague. When Shrew betrayed them by testifying against them in order to get immunity for herself, the Hell's Bells banded together in an attempt to get revenge on her for betraying them. Eventually, they would be successfully taken into custody by X-Factor. Following the events of M-Day and Decimation, all team members save Briquette found themselves completely depowered. They still have operated as criminals in the comics, appearing in the Children of Atom series most recently, but they were a lot less scary because they had to rely on equipment and gadgets in place of, their own powers. Even without their powers, the team mainly stuck together though, minus Briquette and obviously Shrew. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more lists about Marvel villains you might not recognize or something in that realm, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Silver Samurai. While Silver Samurai looks much the same in the comics as he always has, not every iteration of him has been so recognizable. We've seen him turn up here and there on Krakoa recently. He seems to enjoy watching and participating in the friendly single combat matches in the Quarry, and in modern comics, he's recognizable. But how about in modern film? Well, Silver Samurai might not be a main character in Fox's mutant universe, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. He actually made an appearance in the 2013 film The Wolverine. But although here he also seemingly looked the same, when it came to his armor at least, he couldn't be further from his comic book counterpart in actuality. That's because Silver Samurai here was an adamantium robot whom Wolverine had to battle against. Yeah, they made Kennyukio Harada robot armor. He was at least piloted by Ikiro Yoshida, who is obviously that film's version of Ken's own father in the comics. So, at least there was a little bit of a thing, but still, he wasn't even a person. He was just robot armor. Like, Rude. Ken is a whole person, okay? It's not just armor. Number 7, Forearm. Forearm is Michael McCain. Originally, Michael was part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front. He was one of the founding members, but would end up defeated by those that fought against him. Despite generally being on the side of the villains, Forearm was also welcomed onto the mutant island nation of Krakoa, where he could have a fresh start for himself. He accepted the offer and would end up joining Sword and being seen as a member of Magic's Dark Riders, who I think should get their own book. However, on Krakoa, he looks a bit different from his initial appearance, where he decidedly was showing a lot more forearm and had much less shirt. Forearm's mutant power is that he has 4 arms. Get it? Get it? His 4 arms. And now he wears shirts. Good for you, Forearm. Good for you. Although you can also not wear a shirt. You can not wear a shirt if you don't want to wear a shirt. Like, I'm not going to pressure anyone to wear shirts if they don't want to, or vice versa. I'm not going to pressure anyone to like not wear a shirt if they're like, I like my shirt, let me keep my shirt. But I do like his new design as well. His new outfit is pretty cool. Number 6, Thanos. Thanos might look very similar to his initial appearance in the comics, and also looks quite similar on the big screen, but he's seen a pretty big change when it comes to what he's up to recently. In the comics, that is. In the MCU, he's mainly dead and gone. But there is a chance perhaps that he could return. Who knows? Not only have we now met Star Fox or Eros in the MCU, but in the comics, Thanos has become the new Prime Eternal, and as such, their new leader. That's right, this guy just went from being the baddest supervillain around to leader of a superhero team. Although we'll have to see where the Eternals' alignment is in the comics following the events of Avengers vs. X-Men vs. Eternals War, because that's probably going to be crazy. Also, I don't even know what the Eternals is really doing in that mix, but I'm here for it. I'm here to check that out. Number 5, RHINO. RHINO was given a completely new look for his appearance in the second Amazing Spider-Man film. Honestly, RHINO is a hard villain to do in live action, I feel like, so I'm not surprised with the direction that they went with, but also, what a weird direction to go in for that character, considering what they're actually supposed to be like in the comics. In the comics, RHINO is Alexei Sistovich, who is genetically altered and then bonded to a suit of armor that increases his strength and durability. Basically, he's given like a mechanical rhino skin, but like the skin. The armor was modeled after a rhinoceros, as they are known in nature for being relentless when it comes to their assault and extremely hard to defeat due to their tough hide. RHINO, however, has never been known for being very smart, which makes him fairly easy to defeat usually, which seems to be the same idea when it came to his cinematic counterpart. However, the whole design for this character was definitely different than the comic book counterpart, whose armor was much less mech-like or robotic and is more like just the tough hide of a rhino. Really, he kind of just looks like a guy in a rhino suit in the comics. Also, Alexei is just super jacked in the comics, and his cinematic counterpart didn't seem so jacked. He was just like a guy in a suit. Of course, Alexei does get a lot of his jackedness as well from his whole rhino thing, but he also, I think, was jacked still to begin with, I'm pretty sure. He's just more jacked. Number 4, Legion. Legion has a new look in X-Men Onslaught Revelation. This one-shot is kind of like the bookend for the Way of X limited series if you were checking that out, which I personally haven't read all of, but I will say the parts of it that I have read have been strictly excellent, so I would recommend Way of X to anyone that's interested. If you like the idea of pondering the why in life and beliefs, and you enjoy philosophical prose, this is really a great series for you. In Onslaught Revelation, Nightcrawler, Legion, Pixie, and Dust come together to try and defeat the resurrected Onslaught, who has been slowly returning with each resurrection, residing as pieces in the minds of all mutants. In order to help in the fight against Onslaught, Legion makes his mind a safe space for all mutants to come through, in essence also fully connecting with Krakoa and kind of becoming a sort of hive mind if necessary. As such, he gets a redesign, though he still gets to keep the wild shape of his hair that we've all come to recognize so well, and that I've really come to love. Legion, moving forward after the defeat of Onslaught, will also keep this look as he becomes the newly created religion's church. That's right, Legion is the church. He's the building. In essence, people can come into his mind to worship, find community, and seek sanctuary. It's like a nice safe space for people to come and just like be and feel good. It's awesome. I love that Legion is the church. I just think that's great. Number 3, Donald Blake. Donald Blake ended up becoming a villain recently in the comics, which is a pretty big change for a guy who was once also the mighty hero Thor. Donald Blake used to be Thor's human form, but in reality was kind of his own person, or he kind of ended up becoming his own person. He was created by Odin to be a human host for Thor, but after Thor died at the hands of the serpent, Blake became separated from Thor and became his own separate entity. Eventually, he would end up going to the Enchantress for help, only for her to use him to make her own villainous creature referred to as the Keep. Basically, she killed Donald Blake and then used his blood to make the Keep, and we haven't seen the Keep in a while, but I'm sure he's out there somewhere. After Amora and the Keep were defeated by Thor, Blake was laid to rest, living on as a disembodied head in a dream world that was crafted for him. Well, living on as a person in the dream world, but he was just a disembodied head. But he was asleep, so he was dreaming. Eventually, though, Blake came to realize that this world wasn't real, and awoke from his dream, seeking revenge on all Thors across the multiverse for what had happened to him. And don't worry, he wasn't just a head then, he had a body then. He would end up being defeated by 616 Thor in the end, and then made into the God of Lies, as per Thor's brother Loki's suggestion. Thor was like, what do we do with this guy? We shouldn't kill this guy. He's Donald Blake. Loki's like, nah, let's make him the God of Lies. Seems to fit considering everything Donald Blake has been through. Number 2, Taskmaster. Taskmaster is Anthony Masters and is known for being an unstoppable foe. He can master pretty much any skill he can observe. Some would say he's a taskmaster, which makes him a deadly opponent. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we were also introduced to Taskmaster, but the character was changed somewhat for the film in which they were introduced, Black Widow. Instead, Antonia Dreykov, the daughter of General Dreykov, the man behind the Red Room, was Taskmaster. When Black Widow left the Red Room and became an Avenger, she believed she had killed Dreykov, sadly also having to kill his daughter, who basically led them to their target. She was a casualty of the explosion, intended to kill Dreykov himself. Instead, Antonia was actually badly injured and ended up surviving, but her face was permanently scarred. She then became Dreykov's weapon, having studied the moves of the Avengers and having their fighting styles basically uploaded into her brain, allowing her to mimic all their various moves and making her a hard opponent for Black Widow to defeat. Quite different from the comic book version, but still really cool and badass as an alternate version of the character, I think. Number 1, Cyber. Cyber has come a long way when it comes to his look in the comics. Granted, Cyber has also come back a lot of times, so I guess it kind of makes sense that he would look different. He made his first appearance in Marvel Comics Presents in issue 85 in the 90s, where he was introduced to us as a cyborg-appearing Wolverine villain who was hired by General Koi, another enemy of Logan's. Back then, he was just a smile and a coat with a hat on. Currently, however, his design is much different, and he doesn't even go by the name Cyber anymore, instead being known as Hornet in the comics in his newest body. Number 10, Bishop. As some of you pointed out in the comments on the part 1 of this list, a lot of 90s characters, especially 90s X-Men, have completely different looks in the modern day when compared with their 90s appearances. Lucas Bishop is definitely one such character. Although he still has his M tattoo over his eye and a few details in his costume that pay homage to his original look, Bishop has definitely seen some changes, some of which might be so great that fans may not at first recognize him. While he still often is seen with his XSE guns and even still sports a red bandana, Bishop is now a member of the Marauders. Gone are the days of those 90s X-Men colors, and modern day Bishop dresses mainly in reds and blacks, in homage as well to his role as the Hellfire Trading Company's Red Bishop. Also, I love that Bishop is the Red Bishop because he's a bishop and his name's Bishop, it's crazy. Number 9, Crystal. Crystal's initial appearance had her recognizable mainly by her ginger or strawberry blonde hair and a simple white dress. I personally always thought of Crystal as being ginger, but then I see so many different versions of her where she has like maybe blonde hair. So I don't know, but I've always thought of her as a ginger. She is known for being the younger sister of Medusa, who is the Inhuman Queen and true love of Black Bolt. Crystal has had a few different looks, but generally she has longer ginger hair and is either in a yellow suit or a Fantastic Four suit when she was, you know, on that team. She has been known for dating Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, was once married to Quicksilver and had a daughter with him, and she was even for a time married to Ronan the Accuser. Yeah, it's been an interesting dating history, I feel like, for Crystal. All in all, Crystal has had a sort of wild life, and while her costume has changed gradually, comparing her short blonde-haired self in her yellow and black diamond suit to her first appearance with long ginger-like hair in her white dress, looks like a dress to me, and you might not know it's Crystal at first glance. And friends, if you want even more lists where we talk about all the glow-ups in comics and I guess some of the glow-downs, if that's a thing, be sure to let us know that you love this list by giving it a thumbs up. Number 8. Pyro. Pyro might be sporting a very similar suit when it comes to how he looked in his first appearance, but he also now has a skull tattoo. A full face skull tattoo. And honestly, I have come to love it. Not only that, but this version of Pyro was also originally known as a villain, and like many on the island nation of Krakoa, has been given a new lease on life where he no longer needs to be a villain. Instead, recently, Pyro has exclusively acted as a hero, fighting alongside his shipmates and teammates, the Marauders. During his time with the Marauders team, St. John Allardyce ended up taking refuge with his fellow teammates in a tattoo parlor. A few of them decided to get tats while they were there, Pyro included. He decided to get a full face tattoo, getting a black skull tattooed over top his face. And I gotta say, it's just been growing on me more and more every time I read Marauders. At first, after he got this tat, I was expecting, like so many other Krakoans, that Pyro would end up dying and then being resurrected, erasing the tattoo from his face. After all, who needs tattoo removal when you have resurrection protocols, and mutants dying and returning is no longer really a big deal at all. Although I'm sure the Healing Gardens could remove Pyro's tattoo almost as easily. Still, he hasn't gotten it removed or died and been brought back without it yet, so while you might wonder who that is with the skull face tattoo, it seems that it's becoming part of Pyro's modern day look quite seamlessly. So maybe in 10 years from now we'll be like, oh yeah, it's Pyro because the skull face tattoo. Maybe he'll still have it. Number 7. Flash Thompson, or as he's currently known, Agent Anti-Venom. Still, it's pretty wild to think that Flash Thompson, aka Eugene Thompson, started out as Peter Parker's bully back in the day. Flash has come a long way from being an antagonist to a friend of Peter's to a full-on war hero and later superhero. He's battled alcoholism, became an amputee, and even traveled into space where he fought alongside the Guardians of the Galaxy. If you only knew Flash from his first appearance, or vice versa, you only knew him from modern day comics, you'd probably be shocked to see just how different the character is, how far he has come, and how much he has grown and evolved. He even became such a popular character among fans that he got to join the Resurrection Club, being returned to life recently after dying during the fight against Red Goblin. Number 6. Cable. In recent years, Cable has had a completely new look, considering that his old version died and was replaced with his younger version. Of course, his older version has since returned, but there was a good amount of time there in the comics when you might have been confused as to just who exactly you were reading about. Is Kid Cable meant to be Nathan's son, you might have thought, or is he some like de-aged version of Nathan Summers? Well, the latter is the correct assumption if you made it. Young Cable actually hunted his older self down, in essence completing his time loop. But of course, the old man still existed out there, and if you went to the right point and place in time, he would still be living earlier portions of his life. As such, we were able to bring Old Man Cable back in the comics, and young Cable actually realized that he would also have to leave and let the old man basically take over, as while he thought he knew it all, young and all, that's what young people usually think. They think they know it all. It turns out he still has lots to learn. Honestly though, I love both versions of Cable, and I wish that old Cable could team up with his younger self on more occasions. I want like a Kid Cable and Old Man Cable team up comic. Number 5. Speedball, or as he was known for a good amount of time in the comics, Penance. Robert Baldwin initially got his powers after a lab experiment went awry. After being exposed to extra-dimensional radiation, Robbie found that when he was the target of a certain amount of force, his body would transform. Instead of him being harmed from said blow, he would produce a protective barrier, causing him to become basically like a human bouncy ball. He could use this energy to then shield others, blast opponents, or to even halt speeding projectiles in midair. Speedball would later join the New Warriors. However, later on he would be part of an incident at the center of the First Civil War, where 612 civilians were killed, including 60 children. This would prompt him to change in appearance and in mindset, becoming Penance, a spiky armored version of the character who had internal spikes in his suit to remind him of all the victims lost, as he felt personally responsible for their deaths. Speedball has since returned to his original appearance, but it has taken him time to recover both physically and mentally from his time as Penance. And he's kinda still on that road to recovery. He was Penance for a long time. Number 4. Angel. Angel is another mutant superhero who has gone through a ton of different looks in life. Most notably was his shift from having organic wings to techno-organic wings after he lost his organic wings when he became one of Apocalypse's horsemen. The crazy thing is that while Angel seems to appear as mostly his original version, there are times where you might be confused with him as to who is who, as he seems to kind of alternate right now in modern comics between his original form and his techno-organic form, Archangel. As far as I can tell, this hasn't been fully explained yet in the comics, though it has been acknowledged that this happens in a similar manner to his X-Corp partner, Monet. That is, when he gets more emotional or gets more angry, his techno-organic form seems to come out. This was alluded to at the end of issue 2 of X-Corp, their Hellfire Gala issue. And if there have been more explanations on this and I missed them, please feel free to tell me what issues I should in-depth read, because yeah, I feel like there's little details, but we haven't gotten like a full, here's how it is, let me break it down for you. Number 3. Nick Fury. While Nick Fury does look very different in modern day comics in comparison to classic comics, it is important to note that technically these are 2 different characters. Well, technically these are kind of like 3 different characters. Or 4 different characters. There's a lot of characters. The version of Nick Fury we saw in the MCU was actually inspired by the version of the character from the Ultimate Universe, who, fun fact, was also inspired in terms of appearances by Samuel L. Jackson, the very man who would end up playing him. In fact, a lot of the MCU characterization and even stories are inspired by the Ultimate Universe, the alternate reality of 1610, and the stories that went on there. The original Nick Fury of Earth 616 was actually a white man, but he would inevitably be replaced by a 1610 inspired alternate Fury after the original Nick Fury of 616 ended up kind of being transformed into a Watcher. The 1610 version of Fury and Samuel L. Jackson's take on the character would then be adapted for Earth 616, the main comic book continuity, and that's how we would get Nick Fury Jr., who is the son of the original Nick Fury from the comics and looks a lot like Jackson's 1610 inspired version from the MCU. See what I mean? There's lots of Nick Furies. People are like, Nick Fury changed, and I'm like, Nick Fury didn't change, there's just a lot of characters that came together. Number 2. Beast. Beast is one character that has gone through a massive amount of change since we first met Hank McCoy, the lovable vocabularian, scientist, and the X-Men's most bouncy team member, Beast. Back then, Hank was just a relatively large man with enormous feet and enormous hands, but his mutation continued to progress long after that first appearance, changing when he ended up forced to take a serum that he had created based around the hormone that causes mutation. As such, he mutated even farther, which became permanent after he didn't take the antidote quickly enough to thereafter revert the effects. This meant that Hank was now permanently even more muscular, agile, and now completely covered head to toe in gray fur. From there, his fur would become more blue, and over the years his appearance has become borderline lion-like or even kind of cat-like at times. Number 1. Star-Lord. Considering how much Peter Quill has changed with each era of comics, it could be hard for fans to recognize him in modern day. Once again, his appearance and power levels have changed so much. In his initial appearance compared to his modern look, he's basically unrecognizable. And if we go even farther back to the Peter Jason Quill of the 1970s, the Star-Lord of Earth 791 now, he is completely different. It should be noted though that shortly after the main continuity version was introduced in THANOS issue number 8, which came out in 2004, he was shortly after pretty radically changed when he appeared a few years later in Annihilation Conquest from 2007 to 2008, which is pretty much the version of Quill roughly that we have today. although even then, he's still changed quite a bit. Quill more recently in the comics returned from Marinus, an extra-dimensional world where he lived unaging with his friends, partners, and his lovers, Mors and Aradia, for hundreds of years. He came back even more powerful than before he had left, and ended up joining forces once more with the Guardians of the Galaxy to defend the cosmos against the return of the Dark Olympians. Which changes are you in love with when it comes to characters, appearances, or their alignments? And which, if any, are you not really feeling? Let us know in the comments below. Number 10. Storm. Storm has had many different looks throughout the years, and depending on which era of Storm you are most familiar with, you might not recognize her right away when it comes to her appearances in modern day comics. When I think of Storm, one of the most iconic looks I think of is her very different 80s punk rocker look, where she's sporting a bright white mohawk. For me, this look is still one of the first ones that I think of even today. Even if you go back to her first appearance, she looks pretty different in comparison even to the 80s look. The cool thing about the modern day Storm look is that it seems to sort of incorporate all of these looks that have come before while also being quite unique. It's an homage to the past while not discounting the very real possibility of a grander future. That's actually what I like when it comes to a lot of the X-Men's updated looks. It's all about acknowledging the past while also using said past to fuel and motivate the future. Storm's initial appearance, her 80s look, and of course the now. Number 9. Venom. You wouldn't recognize Venom today compared to his 90s appearance either. For one, Venom initially appeared as a villain and therefore not only looked different but also acted quite differently. And now if we're talking about hosts that we associate with Venom, they're also pretty different in terms of their appearance. Currently, the Venom symbiote is teamed up with Eddie Brock's son, Dylan Brock. Oh yeah, if you've been out of comics for a while, Eddie Brock also has a son now. Dylan is actually Anne and Eddie's son, with a little mix-in of Venom as well, who was also there when he was conceived. And if we're talking about Venom in terms of Eddie Brock, you might not recognize him either. He's aged considerably as a result of him becoming the new King in Black following that King in Black event where Null was defeated and Eddie took his place. That was Venom and Eddie Brock then, and that is who Venom is attached to now, and what Eddie looks like now. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about all of the changes in comics, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Echo. Echo is Maya Lopez. When she first appeared, she was a villain who didn't even know that she was a villain in the story. She ended up fighting against Daredevil after being misled and made to believe that he was the one responsible for killing her father. She wasn't really a villain though, she was just like a misguided person. Echo's really, I think, always been a hero deep down. When we first see her, she wears bandages on her arms, possibly an allusion to her one-woman dance show, which is actually based on her life, which was all about how she felt like an Echo. Also, yes, there are many things that Echo is skilled at because her power is like Taskmaster's. She can acquire a physical skill simply by watching it, so she's not just an amazing fighter and martial artist, but she's also a great dancer too. Echo currently in the comics has shown up in the Avengers. She is now the new Phoenix in the comics, having won the opportunity and burden of being bonded with the Phoenix Force during the Phoenix tournament. In fact, Maya in the tournament didn't actually win, but instead was chosen because she had lost the most. The Phoenix Force was looking for a fallen champion apparently, not a big time winner. Echo as the Phoenix looks quite different than her initial appearance, no? I think it's like the Phoenix Flames for me. She still has those bandages though, and she's still got her face paint with her hand. Number 7. Iceman. When Iceman originally came on the scene, he had a very different look. If we go back to his first appearance in X-Men issue number 1, he was actually more like a snowman than an Iceman. Iceman in his early days wasn't quite as frozen solid and was more like an anthropomorphic but faceless snowman in battle. He didn't wear a trademark X-Men uniform, but he did put on his little black booties, which were kind of like, I guess, X-Men trademark uniform booties, because they're black and yellow, and there was a lot of black and yellow coloring with those original uniforms. This meant that Iceman was always the one who had to help Angel get dressed, as Warren had to deal with his wings, both unbinding them and then of course fitting them through his uniform holes, I imagine. We'd later learn in Marvel's Voices Pride from 2021 that Bobby was actually pretty happy to help, as he had a bit of a crush on Warren back in the day. Iceman since then has had a major glow up and appears to look like an ice prince in modern day comics. He even has cool spiky pauldrons. spiky pauldrons. He's also had a glow up in terms of his powers too. Woo! Number 6. Hulkling. Hulkling is another hero who looks pretty different from his first appearance. He used to have a bunch of ear piercings, but I guess he can shapeshift, so it was easy for him to close them all up. I guess he was just like, I'm not into it now, and they're gone. Hulkling was much more gruff looking, I'd say, in his first appearance with the Young Avengers. However, he also had the name Hulkling. I mean, he still has that name, but I know that name has nothing to do really with the Hulk, but still, in his original appearance, he's big, he's green, and he's kind of like the Young Avengers' own version of that character, because, you know, everyone's kind of mirroring someone. Though to be fair, Teddy Altman is very much his own character and his own person, like many of the other Young Avengers. Currently in the comics, Hulkling isn't just a hero, but is also the Emperor of the Skrull/Kree Alliance, the Skree Alliance if you like, and this new role has also dramatically changed his overall outfit and appearance. He looks super cute now, not that he didn't before, of course, he's just a different kind of cute now than he was before. Also, he has totally different hair. His hair now is blonde. It was black, but also shapeshifter, you know what I mean? Number 5. Dazzler. Alison Blair has had a ton of different looks over the years, and there have been countless points in her history when you may have not recognized her. If you've been invested in modern comics for some time, then Alison's current outfit is Dazzler, which she also sported in Way of X issue number 3, the morning after the Hellfire Gala, will likely be recognizable to you. However, if the last time you saw her was in, you know, her own solo series back in the 80s, then you might be confused as to even who this character is. And if you saw her back in 2015 and were familiar with either the present or past appearances of Dazzler, or if you're familiar with that Dazzler, I really doubt that you would recognize her in the present day. There's many times when you'd be like, who is that, depending on which Dazzler you know. There has been a tendency to try and have Allison change with music trends, instead of keeping her in her somewhat, I guess, outdated disco roots. But personally, I think disco can still be a valid genre today. I still love disco, and I'd love to see her even return to that iconic silver jumpsuit. I like that Dazzler's had so many different looks, that's crazy. Number 4. Professor X. When we think of Professor X, usually a lot of us probably reflect back to his look in the 90s animated series. In fact, many X-Men fans who have seen Professor X recently would probably wonder just who they're even looking at. If you are more familiar with his appearance in the 90s, both in the animated series and in the comics, the modern Professor X might throw you for a loop. Currently, Professor X is able to walk again and happens to be sporting not a suit and, you know, a blanket on his lap, but instead an all-black skin-tight one piece. Also, he always wears Cerebro now, obscuring his recognizable face and his bald head. But yeah, that was Professor X then, and this is him now. Number 3. Nature Girl. Nature Girl is amazing. She's one of my favorite of the newer mutants to come out, and recently she has become a lot more metal, both in approach and in her appearance. Nature Girl can basically commune with nature, which often means she can encourage animals to help her, and they actually seem to feel within Nature Girl a kindred spirit. So there's a lot of empathy going on there between both sides. More recently in the X-Men Unlimited Infinity comics, we saw that Nature Girl has been in a constant state of depression and duress, feeling the pain that all nature is currently feeling due to humans polluting and just generally mucking up the planet and its natural and carefully balanced ecosystems. This forced Nature Girl to go on an adventure to fight for what she believes in, which resulted in her kind of accidentally killing someone and then losing all of her hair, just sporting her antlers as she turned to the dark side and took on oiling operations, aiming to destroy them and anyone who wouldn't renounce their loyalty to them. This is not your friendly neighborhood Nature Girl, that's for sure. Nature Girl then, Nature Girl now. I love her new dark look though. I love both versions of Nature Girl. I think Nature Girl's awesome. Number 2. Captain Britain, or more specifically Betsy Braddock. Whether we're looking at things from the point of view as the hero mantle of Captain Britain, or looking at it from the character viewpoint of Betsy Braddock, either way, Betsy is looking pretty different now. For a good amount of time in the comics, Betsy was known for looking just like Quanon, because, well, She was kind of in Kwanen's body, or they were kind of fused together at one point. Fortunately, she has now been restored to her own body, freeing Kwanen and allowing Kwanen to take up the Psylocke mantle. Betsy then went on to become the new Captain Britain in her brother Brian Braddock's place after he was ensorcelled by Morgan Le Fay, becoming her new Dark Knight. It was up to Betsy at that point to take Brian's amulet and become the new Captain Britain until Brian could be saved. Betsy has been shattered and managed to return and is still known as Captain Britain currently, even though Brian also got free, but then Brian was like, you take it, I'm good, I'm gonna do other stuff. You don't have a lot going on right now, Betsy, so take a thing and then make it your own thing. I like it. Number 1. Captain Kate. Even Kitty Pryde's name has shifted somewhat. She's been known by a few different names in the comics: Shadowcat, Sprite, Kitty Pryde. Now however, she prefers if you just call her Kate. Captain Kate is the Red Queen of the Hellfire Trading Company, and typically dresses in red as such. But not only that, she also typically dresses kind of piratey now. I personally love it. This is because Kate is now also the leader of the Marauders, who have reclaimed this one villainous name and are basically a pirate crew who sail the seas, bringing those mutants to Krakoa who want to be there, but who for one reason or another can't get there. They also help deliver and intercept shipments of goods as necessary. So the whole look really fits with what Kate is up to currently in the comics, but it is very different from her original or even her past looks. Kate before, Kate now. Although I will say that original outfit that she's wearing with like the red vest and like the stripy shirt, I was like, is there already like pirate vibes that were kind of carried over here? I don't know.